My name is Marilyn Fletcher, and I'm 74 years old. What I'm about to tell you sounds like something from a movie, but I promise you, every word is true. This is the story of how my stepchildren thought they were throwing away my useless pills, but they were actually destroying the deeds to 8 properties worth over $6 million. And this is the story of how their greed and contempt for me cost them everything they thought they'd inherit. But I need to start at the beginning, because you need to understand how we got to that moment. You need to understand my relationship with my late husband, Charles, with his children from his first marriage, and with the fortune that everyone thought they knew about but really didn't. I met Charles Fletcher when I was 55 years old. I'd been divorced for 10 years at that point, living a quiet life working as a librarian in Portland, Oregon. I had my own small house, my own car, my own retirement savings. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable and independent. I'd raised my daughter Amanda as a single mother after my ex-husband left us when she was 3. Amanda was grown now, married with 2 kids of her own, living in Seattle. Charles was a regular at the library. He'd come in every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, always heading straight for the history section. He was 68 years old, retired from a career in real estate development, and recently widowed. His first wife, Margaret, had died of cancer 2 years earlier. We started talking one day when he asked for help finding a particular book about the Oregon Trail. I helped him locate it, and we ended up chatting for nearly an hour about local history. He had this way of making everything sound fascinating, like every story mattered. The next time he came in, he specifically sought me out to return the book and get recommendations for more. This became our routine. He'd come to the library. We'd talk about books and history and life. And slowly, over the course of about 6 months, our conversations became the highlight of my week. He asked me to coffee one day, and I said yes. That coffee turned into dinner. That dinner turned into many more dinners. And 8 months after we first met, Charles asked me to marry him. "I know we're not kids anymore," he said, holding my hand across the table at the restaurant where he'd proposed. "But I've fallen in love with you, Marilyn. These past months with you have made me feel alive again in a way I didn't think was possible. I want to spend whatever time I have left making you happy." I said yes, crying happy tears, feeling like I'd been given a second chance at love when I'd least expected it. We had a small wedding at a garden venue. Just close family and a few friends. My daughter Amanda was my maid of honor, and she was genuinely happy for me. Charles's 3 children from his first marriage, Thomas, Rebecca, and Jennifer, were there too, but their enthusiasm was considerably less evident. Thomas was 45, a corporate lawyer in San Francisco. Rebecca was 43, a doctor married to another doctor, living in Boston. Jennifer was 40, working in marketing in New York, all successful, all established in their own lives, all very much their mother's children. From the moment I met them, I could feel their resistance. At our engagement dinner, Thomas had pulled Charles aside. I overheard part of their conversation from the bathroom hallway. "Dad, are you sure about this?" Thomas was saying. "You barely know her. What if she's after your money? Your mother's been gone for 2 years, Thomas." Charles replied calmly, "I'm not betraying her memory by finding companionship, and Marilyn isn't after anything. She doesn't even know how much money I have." "Exactly," Thomas said. "Which is why we should have a prenup. Protect the family assets." That stung. But Charles defended me. "I'll handle my own financial affairs, thank you. Marilyn is going to be my wife, and I trust her completely." We did end up getting a prenup, though. Not because I wanted one, but because Charles insisted it would make his children more comfortable. The prenup stated that if we divorced, I wouldn't be entitled to any of his premarital assets. I signed it without hesitation because I wasn't marrying Charles for his money. I didn't even know how much he was worth at that point, though I knew he was comfortable. What I learned after we married was that comfortable was a massive understatement. Charles wasn't just wealthy. He was extraordinarily wealthy. Over his 40-year career in real estate development, he'd built a portfolio of commercial properties, apartment buildings, and prime real estate across Oregon and Washington. His net worth was somewhere around $8 million. But here's what made Charles different from most wealthy people. He didn't flaunt it. He lived in a nice but not ostentatious house. He drove a reliable but not flashy car. He donated generously to charity but anonymously. He believed in living simply and giving back. Money is a tool, not a trophy, he told me once. I've seen too many people destroy their lives and relationships chasing after it or showing it off. The money is there to provide security and to help others. That's all it should be. We had 5 beautiful years together. We traveled, not to expensive resorts, but to historical sites and small towns with interesting stories. We volunteered at the library together. We hosted dinner parties for friends. We spent holidays with my daughter and his children, though his kids always seemed to be evaluating our relationship, looking for evidence that I was taking advantage of their father. Charles was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 4 years into our marriage. The doctors gave him 6 months to a year. He lived for 14 months, fighting every day, and I was with him through all of it. The chemo, the hospital stays, the pain, the fear. His children would visit occasionally. Thomas came twice, Rebecca 3 times, Jennifer once. But I was there every single day. During those final months, Charles made arrangements. He updated his will, organized his affairs, and did something that neither his children nor I knew about at the time. He created a test, a way to see who really cared about him and who just cared about his money. 3 weeks before Charles died, he called me to his bedside. He was lucid that day, clearer than he'd been in weeks. "Marilyn," he said, holding my hand weakly, "I need to tell you something important. It's about my estate." "Charles, we don't need to talk about this now," I said, tears in my eyes. "Just rest." "No, we do," he insisted. "My children are going to inherit most of my estate. That's fair. They're my children, and they should have the security their mother and I worked to provide. But I'm leaving you the house and enough money to be comfortable for the rest of your life. About $2 million. That's too much," I protested. "I don't need— You deserve it," he said firmly. "You've made my last years happy. You've cared for me through this illness. You've been a true partner. I want to know you'll be taken care of." I cried and thanked him, and he smiled that gentle smile I'd fallen in love with. Then he said something strange. "I'm also leaving you my medication organizer, the old one I used to use before I got sick." I was confused. "Your medication organizer?" "Yes, it's in the safe in my study. The combination is your birthday, 5/15/53. When I'm gone, get the organizer from the safe. Keep it safe. Don't let anyone throw it away or take it from you. Promise me." "I promise," I said, though I didn't understand why a medication organizer would be important. "There's a letter in the safe, too," he continued. "Read it after I'm gone. It will explain everything. But Marilyn, this is important. Don't tell anyone about the organizer or the letter. Not my children, not your daughter, not anyone. Can you do that for me?" "Of course," I said. "But Charles, why—" "You'll understand when you read the letter," he said, squeezing my hand. "Just trust me. And remember, keep the medication organizer safe. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, keep it safe." He made me promise 3 more times before he was satisfied. Then he drifted off to sleep, and I sat there wondering what could possibly be so important about an old medication organizer. Charles died 2 weeks later, early on a Tuesday morning. I was holding his hand. His last words were, "Thank you for loving me." Then he was gone, and I was alone in a way I hadn't been since I'd met him. The funeral was large. Charles had been well known in the real estate community, and people came from all over to pay their respects. His children were there, of course, playing the role of grieving children, though I noticed they spent a lot of time talking to their father's lawyer rather than mourning. After the funeral, Thomas, Rebecca, and Jennifer came back to the house. My house now. Technically, though it didn't feel like mine, it felt like Charles's house, and I was just living in it temporarily. Marilyn, Thomas said, sitting in the living room with his sisters flanking him like he was about to conduct a business meeting. We need to discuss Dad's estate. The lawyer is handling all of that, I said quietly. The will reading is scheduled for next week. We know what's in the will, Rebecca said coolly. Dad told us, you get the house and $2 million. We split the rest of the estate, the properties, the investments, everything else. That sounds fair, I said, though I hated how they made it sound like a negotiation. It is fair, Jennifer said. More than fair, considering you were only married to our father for 5 years. The emphasis on only 5 years stung, like our marriage had been less valid because it was shorter, like the love I'd shared with Charles didn't matter because we hadn't had decades together. Your father and I loved each other very much, I said firmly. The length of our marriage doesn't diminish that. Of course not, Thomas said in a tone that suggested he didn't believe that at all. Anyway, we'll be going through Dad's things over the next few days, sorting out what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. You understand. This is still my home, I said. I'd appreciate if you'd ask me before removing or throwing away anything. We're not going to take your things, Marilyn, Rebecca said with exaggerated patience, like she was talking to a child. Just Dad's things, his clothes, his papers, his personal items. You're welcome to keep anything you want as a memento, but we need to sort through his estate. I didn't have the energy to argue. I was exhausted from weeks of caretaking and grief. So I just nodded and went upstairs to my room while they began their systematic dismantling of Charles's study. That night after they'd left, I remembered Charles's instructions, the medication organizer, the letter. I went to his study, which now looked ransacked, with papers and files everywhere, and opened the safe with the combination he'd given me. Inside was a large medication organizer, the kind with 7 days and 4 times per day slots. It was old and worn, made of beige plastic, and there was a sealed envelope with my name on it in Charles's handwriting. I took both items to my bedroom, locked the door, and opened the letter. This is what it said. My dearest Marilyn, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry to leave you, but I'm grateful I got to spend my final years with someone who loved me for who I was, not what I had. Now, about the medication organizer. I know you're confused about why I asked you to keep it safe. The reason is simple. Hidden in each of those medication slots are not pills, but tiny rolled-up property deeds. 8 of my most valuable properties, the ones I've kept separate from my main estate, have their deeds hidden in that organizer. These properties include the downtown Portland commercial building, the Seattle apartment complex, the 3 Bend vacation rentals, the Salem office building, and 2 Portland residential properties. Together, they're worth approximately $6 million. I've kept these properties separate from my main estate for a reason. I wanted to see what would happen after I died. I wanted to see if my children would treat you with respect and kindness, or if they would show their true colors. Here's what I suspect will happen. My children will go through my things. They will see the medication organizer. They will assume it's just an old container with my pills in it, and they will throw it away without a second thought, because they won't see value in something that looks medical and personal. If that happens, if they throw away the organizer, then you need to know that those deeds are irreplaceable in a way. Yes, property deeds can be recreated, but these specific deeds have annotations and notes I made over the years, documenting improvements, investments, and details that would take months or years to reconstruct. More importantly, possession of these original deeds makes the transfer and sale of these properties much simpler and faster. If my children throw away the organizer, they will have literally thrown away $6 million, and in doing so, they will have proven that they care nothing for my wishes or my possessions, only for obvious money if they do throw it away. You have a choice. You can tell them what they've lost and watch them scramble to try to fix it, or you can keep this information to yourself. Secure the properties in your name. I've made provisions for this with my lawyer, who has duplicate deeds secured separately, and let my children inherit only what's in the main will. The choice is yours, my love. But I wanted you to have options. I wanted you to have power in this situation, because I know my children will not make your life easy after I'm gone. If, by some miracle, my children treat you with respect and don't throw away my belongings without asking, then tell them about the properties and split them fairly. But if they show you contempt, if they treat you like an outsider, if they try to push you out of the home we shared, well, then maybe they don't deserve this inheritance. I love you, Marilyn. Thank you for making my final chapter beautiful. Yours always, Charles. I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking. Then I carefully opened the medication organizer. Sure enough, in each slot was a tiny, tightly rolled piece of paper. I carefully unrolled one. It was a property deed for a commercial building in downtown Portland, annotated with Charles's handwriting noting renovation costs, tenant information, and projected value. I rolled it back up, put it back in its slot, and closed the organizer. Then I put both the organizer and the letter in my bedside table drawer and locked it. The next morning, Thomas, Rebecca, and Jennifer came back. They were in the study again, boxing up Charles's things. I brought them coffee and pastries, trying to be a good hostess despite my grief. Thanks, Marilyn, Thomas said absently, barely looking up from the file he was reading. We found Dad's medical records, Rebecca said. We're going to need these for the estate documentation. Do you know if there are more somewhere? I think that's everything, I said. The hospice nurses were very thorough about keeping records. What about his medications? Jennifer asked. Did the hospice take everything back? Yes, they removed all the active medications, I said carefully. There might be some old pill bottles in the bathroom cabinet, but nothing current. We should throw all that out, Rebecca said. No point keeping expired medications around. They went through the study, the bathroom, Charles's closet. They were efficient, almost ruthless in their sorting. Keep, donate, trash. Everything was being categorized and disposed of. Around noon, Thomas called out, Hey, what about this medication organizer? It's got some pills in it. My heart stopped. I walked to the study door and saw Thomas holding the beige medication organizer from my bedside drawer. How did you get that? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. It was on Dad's desk, Thomas said. Probably got moved when we were sorting papers. That was impossible. I'd locked it in my bedside table. Someone had gone into my bedroom and gone through my things. But I didn't say that. Not yet. I'll take that, I said, reaching for it. Thomas pulled it back. Why, it's just old pills. We need to throw this out. It was your father's, I said. I'd like to keep it. Why would you want to keep an old medication organizer? Rebecca said, looking at me like I was being ridiculous. Marilyn, you can't keep every single thing that belonged to Dad. That's hoarding. I'm not keeping everything, I said, my voice shaking slightly. But I'd like to keep that. Your father asked me to. Dad was on a lot of morphine at the end, Jennifer said dismissively. He probably didn't know what he was saying. He knew exactly what he was saying, I said firmly. And he specifically asked me to keep that organizer. Please give it to me. Thomas opened it and looked inside. These pills are ancient. Some of them don't even have labels. Marilyn, this is literally garbage. Why would Dad want you to keep garbage? Please, I said, reaching for it again. Just give it to me. This is ridiculous, Rebecca said. Thomas, throw it away. No, I said loudly. That belongs to me. Give it to me now. They all stared at me like I'd lost my mind, like I was a crazy widow getting emotional over an old pill organizer. Okay, Thomas said in a condescending tone. If it means that much to you here. He handed it to me, but the look on his face was pure contempt, like I was pathetic for wanting to keep such a worthless item. I took it back to my bedroom and locked it in my drawer again. Then I went to check my room. Sure enough, the drawer had been forced open. I could see scratches around the lock. They'd been going through my private things. I went back downstairs. Which one of you broke into my bedroom and went through my personal belongings? We didn't break in, Jennifer said. The drawer was stuck, so Thomas jimmied it open. We were looking for Dad's important papers. In my bedroom, I said. In my personal drawer? We thought Dad might have put some documents in there, Thomas said with a shrug. Sorry if you feel we violated your privacy, but we're trying to settle Dad's estate. By going through my underwear drawer? I said, anger rising. That's completely unacceptable. Oh, please, Rebecca said. Don't be so dramatic. We weren't looking at your underwear. We were looking for financial documents. In my bedroom, I repeated, without asking me, without my permission. This is still Dad's house, Jennifer said coldly. Technically, it's part of his estate until probate is complete. We have every right to go through it. Actually, the house transferred to me immediately upon your father's death, I said. That was specified in the will. This is my house, and you just violated my privacy, Thomas waved his hand dismissively. Whatever. Look, we'll be done here in a few more hours. Then we'll be out of your hair. They continued their sorting, and I went back to my room, shaking with anger and stress. They'd gone through my private things. They'd taken something Charles had specifically asked me to keep safe. They'd dismissed my request to keep it like I was being irrational. Charles had been right. His children didn't respect me. They didn't see me as their father's widow, or as a person deserving of consideration. They saw me as an obstacle, a gold digger, who'd lucked into 5 years with their father, and didn't deserve any part of his legacy. That afternoon, while I was in the kitchen making more coffee, I heard Rebecca's voice from the study. I still can't believe she wanted to keep that old medication organizer. How pathetic is that? She's probably worried about money, Jennifer replied. Thinks she can't afford new pill organizers or something. Dad left her $2 million, Thomas said. She'll be fine. More than fine. More than she deserves for 5 years of marriage. I just hope she sells this house quickly, Rebecca said. It's worth at least $800,000. She should sell it and downsize to something more appropriate for a woman her age. A woman her age? Jennifer snorted. God, she's what, 60? 74. Thomas corrected. She doesn't have that many years left. Why does she need a 4-bedroom house? They laughed, and I stood in the kitchen doorway, frozen. They were talking about me like I was already dead, like I was just some old woman who'd temporarily inconvenienced them by marrying their father. I made a decision in that moment. I wasn't going to tell them about the properties. Not now, not ever. They didn't deserve to know. They didn't deserve Charles's thoughtfulness, or his test, or his inheritance beyond what was explicitly in the will. They left later that afternoon with boxes of Charles's clothes, books, and personal items. Thomas gave me a perfunctory hug goodbye. We'll see you at the will reading next week, he said. And Marilyn, I know this has been hard on you, but it's been hard on us too. Dad was our father for a lot longer than he was your husband. Remember that. The implication was clear. My grief was less valid than theirs because I'd known Charles for a shorter time. My relationship with him was less important. I was less important. After they left, I sat in the empty house and cried. Not just for Charles, but for the family I'd hoped we could be. For the stepchildren I thought might eventually accept me. For the loss of that possibility, the will reading happened the following Tuesday. Charles's lawyer, Roger Matthews, read through the will in his office. Thomas, Rebecca, and Jennifer sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other. The will was exactly as Charles had told me. I inherited the house and $2 million. His 3 children would split the rest of his estate. Approximately $5 million in stocks, bonds, and the properties that were part of his publicly known portfolio. But there was no mention of the 8 properties whose deeds were in the medication organizer, because technically, those properties weren't part of this will. They were held in a separate trust that Charles had never mentioned to his children. Is that everything? Thomas asked Roger after the reading was complete. That's everything in the primary will, Roger said carefully. What does that mean? Rebecca asked sharply. Is there another will? There are other estate documents, Roger said, choosing his words carefully. But they'll be revealed when the time is appropriate. When the time is appropriate, Jennifer said. What kind of answer is that? I'm sorry, but I'm not at liberty to discuss the details right now, Roger said. Mr. Fletcher left very specific instructions about the timing of certain revelations. Revelations about what? Thomas demanded. I really can't say more than that, Roger said firmly. I'm bound by attorney-client privilege and Mr. Fletcher's explicit instructions. The 3 siblings looked at each other with confusion and suspicion. Then they looked at me. Do you know what he's talking about? Rebecca asked me directly. I have no idea. I lied smoothly. Charles and I didn't discuss his legal affairs in detail. They didn't believe me. I could see it in their faces. But they couldn't prove I knew anything. The meeting concluded and we all went our separate ways. Over the next few weeks, I met privately with Roger. He explained the trust that held the 8 properties, confirmed that the deeds I had were legitimate, and walked me through the process of officially transferring them into my name. Charles set this up about 6 months before he died. Roger told me. He suspected his children might not treat you well after his death. He wanted to give you financial security beyond what was in the main will. Did he tell you about the medication organizer? I asked. Roger smiled slightly. He did. He called it his test of character. He said if his children had any respect for him or his wishes, they wouldn't throw away or dismiss something that obviously had personal significance. The fact that they tried to take it from you and called it garbage, well, that told him everything he needed to know. They're going to be furious when they find out, I said. That's their problem, Roger said. Charles was of sound mind when he created this trust. It's legal. It's binding, and there's nothing they can do about it. The properties were transferred into my name quietly over the next 2 months. I didn't tell anyone except my daughter Amanda, who was thrilled for me and proud that I'd stood up to Charles's children. I decided not to sell the properties immediately. Instead, I hired a property management company to handle them. The rental income alone was approximately $40,000 per month. Combined with the $2 million Charles had left me in the will, I was wealthy beyond anything I'd ever imagined for myself. Charles's children, meanwhile, continued to treat me with barely concealed contempt. They would call occasionally to ask about items from the house. Had I seen their father's golf clubs? Did I know where his college yearbooks were? Things like that. They never asked how I was doing or if I needed anything. I was just the keeper of their father's stuff, nothing more. About 6 months after Charles died, Rebecca called me sounding annoyed. Marilyn, we're trying to finalize some of Dad's estate tax paperwork, and there are some properties we can't account for. Do you know anything about a commercial building in downtown Portland? My heart started beating faster. What about it? It's listed in some old records as being owned by Dad, but it's not in the will, and it's not in any of the accounts we have access to. Same with an apartment building in Seattle and some rentals in Bend. Roger is being weirdly cagey about it. I don't know anything about that, I said. Maybe your father sold those properties before he died. Maybe, Rebecca said, but she sounded suspicious. Roger says the properties still exist but won't tell us who owns them now. It's very strange. I'm sure your father had his reasons for however he structured his estate, I said neutrally. Yeah, Rebecca said. I'm starting to think those reasons have something to do with you. She hung up without saying goodbye. A few weeks later, I got a visit from all 3 siblings. They showed up at my door unannounced, looking angry. We need to talk to you about Dad's estate, Thomas said without preamble. All right, I said, not inviting them in. What about it? We hired a forensic accountant, Rebecca said. We've been tracking Dad's assets over the years, and there are 8 properties that are missing. Properties worth millions of dollars. Properties that should have been part of our inheritance. I don't know anything about that, I said, keeping my face neutral. The properties were transferred into a private trust 6 months before Dad died, Jennifer said, and then they were transferred out of that trust 2 months ago. Into someone else's name. We can't find out whose name because the trust documents are sealed, but our lawyer thinks we can get a court order to unseal them. Then I suppose you'll find out whose name they're in, I said calmly. It's you, isn't it? Thomas said, stepping closer. Somehow you convinced Dad to sign those properties over to you. You manipulated a dying man. Be very careful what you accuse me of, I said sharply. Your father was of sound mind when he made all of his estate decisions. And I didn't manipulate anyone. Then how do you explain 8 missing properties? Rebecca demanded. I don't have to explain anything, I said. I'm not the executor of your father's estate. Talk to Roger if you have questions. Roger won't tell us anything, Jennifer practically shouted. He keeps citing attorney-client privilege and Dad's instructions. What instructions? What did Dad tell him? I have no idea, I lied. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have plans this afternoon. I started to close the door, but Thomas put his hand out to stop it. We're going to fight this, he said. Whatever Dad did, we're going to challenge it. Those properties should be ours. That's your right, I said. But I'd think very carefully before you drag your father's name through court battles and accusations. Is that really how you want to honor his memory? That gave them pause. Thomas removed his hand and I closed the door. They did try to challenge the trust. They filed paperwork, got lawyers involved, demanded investigations. But Charles had been thorough. The trust was airtight. He'd had multiple doctors certify his mental competency. He'd had everything notarized and witnessed. There was no legal ground to challenge his decisions. It took almost 2 years. But eventually their lawyers told them they had no case. The properties were legally mine, and there was nothing they could do about it. That's when Rebecca figured it out. She called me one afternoon, and her voice was different. Not angry, but stunned. It was the medication organizer, wasn't it? She said. I didn't say anything. That day we were cleaning out Dad's study, Rebecca continued. Thomas tried to throw away that old medication organizer, and you insisted on keeping it. We thought you were being ridiculous, getting emotional over trash. But the deeds were in it, weren't they? The property deeds were rolled up in that pill organizer. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. Oh my God, Rebecca said. And she actually laughed, a bitter, shocked laugh. Dad hid $6 million in property deeds in a medication organizer, and we tried to throw it away. We called it garbage. If that were true, I said carefully, it would suggest that your father wanted to see if you'd respect something that looked worthless, but was actually precious, like testing whether you cared about his wishes or just his money. There was a long silence. Then Rebecca said quietly, We failed the test, didn't we? I think that's a question you need to ask yourself, I said. Does Thomas know? She asked. I haven't told anyone, I said. What you choose to tell your siblings is up to you. He's going to lose his mind, Rebecca said. Jennifer, too. We literally threw away $6 million. No, I corrected. You tried to throw it away, but I kept it safe like your father asked me to. Because he knew, Rebecca said, realization dawning in her voice. He knew we'd do exactly what we did. He knew we didn't respect you, that we saw you as some gold digger who tricked him into marriage. So he set up a test and we failed spectacularly. Your father loved you, I said gently, but he also saw your flaws clearly. He wanted to know if you'd treat his widow with kindness and respect, or if you'd treat her like an interloper. You chose the latter. We were horrible to you, Rebecca said, and for the first time she sounded genuinely remorseful. We went through your personal things. We dismissed your feelings. We talked about you like you didn't matter. Yes, I said simply. You did all of those things. I'm sorry, Rebecca said. I'm genuinely sorry, not because of the money. Well, not just because of the money, but because you loved Dad, and you cared for him when he was dying, and we treated you like you were nothing. Thank you for saying that, I said. That means more than you know. For what it's worth, Rebecca said. Dad was happy with you. I could see that, even though I didn't want to admit it. You made his last years good. That should count for something. We talked for a while longer, the first real conversation we'd ever had. By the end, I actually felt like maybe there could be some kind of relationship between us going forward. Not close. Too much had happened. But cordial at least. Thomas and Jennifer, when they found out, didn't take it as well. Thomas sent me a furious letter through his lawyer, accusing me of elder abuse and manipulation. Jennifer called me crying and screaming, saying I'd stolen her inheritance and she'd never forgive me. I didn't respond to either of them. What was the point? Charles had made his choice. He'd tested his children and found them wanting. That wasn't my fault. Now here I am at 74 years old, living in the beautiful home I shared with Charles, financially secure for the rest of my life, and deeply grateful for a husband who understood that dignity and respect are worth more than any amount of money. The medication organizer sits on a shelf in my office, empty now except for one rolled-up piece of paper. It's the letter Charles wrote to me, explaining everything. I keep it there as a reminder that sometimes the most valuable things in life look worthless to people who only see dollar signs. Charles's test revealed exactly what he suspected. His children cared more about obvious wealth than they cared about honoring their father's wishes or treating his widow with respect. They literally tried to throw away $6 million because they couldn't see past the surface, couldn't see that what looked like trash was actually treasure. The irony isn't lost on me. They called the medication organizer garbage and useless pills. They dismissed it, just like they dismissed me, an old medication organizer, an old woman, both worthless in their eyes. But Charles knew better. He knew that real value isn't always obvious. He knew that respect and kindness matter more than bloodlines or length of marriage. And he structured his estate to reward the person who'd shown him love and care, regardless of what his children thought about it. Do I feel guilty about inheriting those properties? Sometimes. They were Charles's children, and on some level they did deserve to inherit from their father. But then I remember how they treated me, how they went through my private things, how they tried to take something Charles explicitly asked me to keep, how they talked about me like I was nothing. And I remember that Charles gave them a chance. If they'd been kind to me, if they'd respected his wishes, if they'd treated that medication organizer with the care he'd asked for, he would have wanted me to share those properties with them. The letter said as much. But they didn't. They failed his test in every possible way. Rebecca understands this now, I think. We've had coffee a few times over the past year. She's working on herself, going to therapy, examining why she treated me the way she did. She admitted that part of it was grief. She was angry at her father for dying, for marrying me, for moving on from her mother's memory, and she took that anger out on me. I couldn't be mad at Dad while he was dying. She told me over coffee one day, so I was mad at you instead. You were easier to blame. If you hadn't been in the picture, I could have pretended Dad was still the same man who'd been married to my mom. But you were proof that he'd moved on, that life continued, that people we love don't stay frozen in time. I appreciated her honesty. Your father loved your mother very much, I told her. He talked about her often, but he also believed that life is for the living, and that we honor the dead by continuing to live fully, not by staying trapped in grief. I see that now, Rebecca said. I just wish I'd seen it sooner, before I threw away $6 million. She laughed, but it was a sad laugh. You didn't throw away $6 million, I said. I kept it safe. The money still exists. But it's yours now, Rebecca said, as it should be, given how we acted. But I can't help thinking about how different things might have been if we'd just been decent human beings. Thomas and Jennifer never came around. The last I heard, Thomas was still trying to find some legal angle to challenge the trust, even though his lawyers had told him it was pointless. Jennifer stopped speaking to me entirely, and from what Rebecca tells me, barely speaks to her siblings either. The whole situation destroyed what was left of their family unity. That's the saddest part of this story, really. Charles had hoped his test would bring clarity, and it did. But that clarity came at the cost of his children's relationships with each other and with me. They're all still dealing with the inheritance, but they're not dealing with it together. They're fractured, divided by resentment and regret. I've thought a lot about whether Charles did the right thing with his test. Part of me wishes he'd just been straightforward. Put everything in the will, divide it clearly, and let that be the end of it. But another part of me understands why he did what he did. He wanted to see who we all really were when the stakes were high. He wanted to know if his children would honor him and respect me, or if they'd reveal their true priorities. They revealed their true priorities, and now they have to live with the consequences. As for me, I've tried to honor Charles's memory by using the money wisely. I've donated significant amounts to the library where we met, funding a new wing named after Charles. I've set up scholarships for first-generation college students. I've contributed to cancer research in his name, and I've made sure my daughter Amanda and her children are financially secure. I've also reached out to Thomas and Jennifer multiple times, offering to help them if they're struggling financially. I don't want Charles's money to be a source of bitterness forever. But both times they've refused my help. Thomas sent back a curt email saying he didn't want my guilt money. Jennifer didn't respond at all. So I've stopped trying. You can't force people to accept grace or forgiveness. All you can do is offer it, and hope that someday they'll be ready to receive it. I'm 74 years old now, 3 years after Charles's death. I live comfortably in our home, surrounded by memories of the man who loved me and trusted me with his final test. The medication organizer sits on my shelf, a reminder of a strange and painful chapter in my life. Sometimes I take it down and look at it, marveling at how something so ordinary contained something so valuable. 28 little plastic compartments, each one designed to hold a day's worth of pills, each one holding instead a rolled-up property deed worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Charles was a clever man, a wise man, and a man who understood that the greatest test of character isn't what we do when we think we're being watched. It's what we do when we think something doesn't matter. His children thought the medication organizer didn't matter, thought it was trash, thought I was foolish for wanting to keep it. And in thinking that, in dismissing something their father had touched and used and specifically wanted preserved, they revealed exactly who they were. Were they terrible people? No, I don't think Thomas, Rebecca, or Jennifer are fundamentally bad. They're complicated people who were dealing with grief and change and the uncomfortable reality that their father had built a whole new life with someone who wasn't their mother. But they let their discomfort turn into contempt. They let their grief turn into cruelty. And they paid a steep price for it. The question I ask myself sometimes is, would I have done the same thing in their position? If my mother had died and my father had remarried, would I have been kind to his new wife? Would I have respected his choices? Would I have seen past my own grief to recognize another person's worth? I'd like to think I would have. I'd like to think I'm better than that, but I honestly don't know. Maybe Charles's test was as much about me as it was about his children. A test of whether I could be gracious in victory, whether I could offer forgiveness to people who'd hurt me, whether I could see past the money to the broken relationships underneath. I hope I've passed that test. I've tried to be kind to Rebecca, to remain open to reconciliation with Thomas and Jennifer, to use Charles's wealth in ways that honor his values. But I'm not perfect. There are days when I'm angry at his children for how they treated me. Days when I think they got exactly what they deserved, and I don't owe them anything. Those are the days when I take out Charles's letter and read it again, reminding myself that he left me with a choice. I could be vindictive or I could be gracious. I could hoard the wealth or I could share it. I could let their cruelty turn me into a cruel person, or I could rise above it. Most days I manage to rise above it. Some days I don't. I'm only human after all. But here's what I know for certain. Charles loved me. He trusted me. He believed I would do the right thing with his test and his inheritance. And I've tried my best to honor that trust. The medication organizer will stay on my shelf for the rest of my life. When I die, my daughter Amanda will inherit it, along with a letter explaining its significance. And she'll have to decide what to do with Charles's properties, whether to keep them in our family or to share them with Charles's children and grandchildren. I've told her the whole story. I've explained the test, the failure, the consequences, and I've told her that the choice will be hers to make. Maybe by then Thomas and Jennifer will have softened. Maybe time will have healed some of the wounds. Or maybe they'll still be bitter and angry, feeling cheated out of what they think should have been theirs. Either way, it won't be my problem anymore. I'll have done my best, used the money well, tried to be fair and kind despite the circumstances. That's all any of us can do. For now, I wake up every morning in the home I shared with Charles. I manage the properties he entrusted to me. I volunteer at the library where we met. I spend time with my daughter and grandchildren. I have coffee with Rebecca when she's in town, and I live my life as fully as I can, knowing that Charles wanted me to be happy and secure. The medication organizer was supposed to hold pills, little doses of medicine meant to keep someone alive and healthy. Instead, it held deeds, little pieces of paper that represented years of Charles's work, decades of building wealth, and a lifetime of wanting to provide for the people he loved. His children saw it as garbage, as useless pills from a dead man, as something to be thrown away without a second thought. But I saw it as Charles saw it, as a treasure disguised as trash, as a test of who we really are when we think no one important is watching, as a reminder that value isn't always obvious, and that sometimes the most precious things come in the most unlikely packages. They threw my medications in the trash, calling them useless pills. But those weren't pills. They were deeds to 8 properties. They were $6 million. They were Charles's final lesson to his children about respect, kindness, and looking beyond the surface. And in throwing them away, or trying to, they threw away more than money. They threw away the chance to prove they deserved it. They threw away their father's trust. They threw away the opportunity to show that they valued him as more than just a source of inheritance. I didn't steal anything from Charles's children. I didn't manipulate or scheme or plot. I just kept safe what their father asked me to keep safe. I just valued what they dismissed. I just passed a test they didn't even know they were taking. And now, 3 years later, I can finally tell this story with something approaching peace. Not happiness, There's too much sadness in it for that. But peace. The peace of knowing I did right by Charles. The peace of knowing I tried to be kind even when his children weren't. The peace of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. Or maybe there are no good guys and bad guys. Maybe there are just people trying their best in difficult circumstances, sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing. Maybe Charles's children aren't villains. They're just people who let their worst impulses win when they should have been better. I'll never know what would have happened if they'd been kind to me from the start. If they'd welcomed me as their father's wife instead of resenting me as an interloper. If they'd respected the medication organizer instead of dismissing it. Would Charles have revealed the properties then? Would he have wanted me to share them? The letter suggested he would have. But we'll never know, because they made their choice, and now we all have to live with it. So that's my story. The story of how a medication organizer full of property deeds became a test of character. The story of how $6 million in real estate was almost thrown in the trash. The story of how a widow stood up for herself and honored her husband's final wishes, even when his children tried to make her feel small. I'm Marilyn Fletcher. I'm 74 years old. I was married to Charles Fletcher for 5 beautiful years. And when his children threw away what they thought were useless pills, they were actually throwing away their chance at millions of dollars. And more importantly, their chance to prove they could be the people their father hoped they'd be. They failed that test, but I didn't. And every day when I look at that medication organizer on my shelf, I'm reminded that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone who cares enough to look beyond the surface. Charles knew I was that person. He knew I'd keep his medication organizer safe, even when others called it garbage. He knew I'd see the value that others missed. He knew I'd pass his test. And he was right. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you to look closer at the things and the people that others might dismiss as worthless. Because sometimes what looks like trash is actually treasure. Sometimes what looks like nothing is actually everything. And sometimes the greatest inheritances aren't the ones that are obvious. They're the ones we have to fight to protect, to understand, to appreciate. My husband gave me more than property deeds hidden in a medication organizer. He gave me a lesson about value, about respect, about seeing what others miss. And that lesson is worth more than all the properties combined. I keep that medication organizer on my shelf not because of what it once held, but because of what it represents. The wisdom of a man who knew that character is revealed in small moments, that respect can't be demanded but must be earned, and that sometimes the best way to know someone's heart is to give them something that looks worthless and see if they treasure it anyway. His children saw worthless pills. I saw priceless deeds. And that made all the difference. God bless you all. And remember, before you throw something away because it looks like garbage, take a moment to really look at it. Because you never know when what seems worthless might actually be the most valuable thing you'll ever hold.